Welcome to the high school football preview show presented by Gold Athletics. I'm your host, John Saranitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Tyler Emerald. Adam Kirchen is on assignment tonight, so join us tonight. Once again is Mukala Kabongo. Mukala, Tyler, how are you guys doing tonight?
Doing great, John.
Doing good, doing good.
All right, before we get started here, I do want to remind you, coaches, if you are in the market for a fundraiser and you don't know what to do, well, Gold Athletics has you covered. Matt Ross and his team has years of experience in fundraising, and they have a variety of fundraisers that can fit your program and your community. Go over to goldathletics.com today and check out some of the variety of fundraising options that Matt and his team have. They'll get you on the road to making money in no time. Again, go to goldathletics.com today and check out what they have. You won't regret it. Like I said, Matt and his team have been in the business for a long time. I know a lot of people that do well year in and year out with Gold Athletics fundraisers. Do yourself a favor, coaches, and go over to the site today and find the fundraiser that works for you, your school, and your program. All right, gentlemen, it's hard to believe that we're already heading into week 3 of the high school football season. Goes by fast. Before we get started here, Tyler, you and I talked about this off the air, and the three of us just talked about it. CM just announced earlier this evening that their game against St. Francis on Saturday is canceled. CM will receive a forfeit win as a result. The reason the game was canceled is apparently St. Francis, who played out in Ohio last week, apparently they have a sickness going through the team. They have a bug, and as a result, they canceled the game. So now that means that CM essentially is going to get a double bye. They don't play again until September 27th when they go out to face the Leominster Blue Devils. So interesting there. I mean, I don't know much about St. Francis in terms of their numbers and the program, but I mean, look, it's going around. It's that time of year. Remember now, schools are giant petri dishes. Kids get sick the first couple months of the school year. You know that going in, and that's why important hygiene, especially the beginning of the school year, is important. It's just a little odd to me that they would just cancel the game altogether. I know that it's a one-shot deal going out there if you're CM, but it's not good for CM, and I don't think it's fair to the CM program.
I agree with that, John. I don't think it's fair as well. You know, you have this game scheduled months in advance, and to find out on a Wednesday, 3 days prior to the game, that you're not going out there, I do think that's unfortunate. You had referenced the numbers quickly. Like, also, I have no idea what St. Francis numbers look like, but they're one of the best Catholic schools in upstate New York, so I would imagine that their numbers are pretty decent. So to me, it's got a little inexcusable that they weren't able to come up with some sort of resolution and leave CM with, now CM might be rusty playing Leominster next week, right? 2 weeks off, coming off of that Cardinal Hayes game. So it's definitely an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, definitely unfortunate, especially for all the players too. You know, I'm sure they were eager to get back on the field just after losing their first game, and just trying to get back and build something before they get really in the thick of things of their schedule. So it's very unfortunate. But yeah, it's a couple of days beforehand they announced it. Because I'm sure CM already had their travels all set up and
Yeah.
everything, and now they have to put all that aside because of this. So it's very, 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 very unfortunate. So might be one of those things they look at now when they're scheduling these out of state games. So they might just
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because again, now you're talking about paying for buses and meals and all the costs that are associated with playing an out-of-state game. And I'm not even sure for all I know, they might have been staying over Friday night to play the game Saturday. It's not a ride that's that easy to make the day of the game. You could, but they'd have to leave early. So I'm not sure if hotels were in play or not. But yeah, I don't like it. I think. Look, like Tyler, I think you make a great point. I would imagine that the program has enough numbers that they could have played the game. I mean, how bad is this sickness? Again, I'm not questioning it. I'm sure it's going on, but you got to try to play the game. Maybe you push it back a day, but I don't know. Who knows? We're not privy to the logistics, but I do think that unfortunately, CM now has another week that they're off. And while yes, you could say, all right, well, if they got banged up against Cardinal Hayes, they can rest some guys. They can also be rusty, and you don't want that as you head into a big game against Leominster. All right, gentlemen, let's jump into the preview here. And of course, we're going to preview some of the top matchups this weekend in New England. And we're going to go across the region. We're going to start with Massachusetts, St. John's Prep at Central Catholic. Prep has looked pretty impressive in their first 2 wins over Marshfield and Londonderry. They take on a Central Catholic team that comes into the game 1-1. They beat Franklin, lost last week to Springfield Central. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Just some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I mean, St. John's Prep's handily defeated 2 very good teams. I saw Marshfield play. Marshfield's a good team. Londonderry consistently a top 3, top 5 program in New Hampshire. And these games haven't been close. So I think that just kind of shows how good St. John's Prep is early on in the season. I think Chris Vargas is really going to unlock some things on the offensive side for them and really take that team to the next level. You could argue he's only a freshman. He's played 2 games. You could argue that Merrick Barlow and Chris Vargas is the best receiver quarterback combination in the state right now. So I think they're just a little too high powered on offense. We know what we're going to get out of St. John's Prep on defense. And, it feels like we talk about this every week. Central Catholic, they're a good team, but they're on the younger side. So we kind of saw that last week as well against Springfield Central. I just don't think they're quite ready to beat these upper echelon teams yet. So I got St. John's Prep.
Yeah, having watched Central Catholic their first 2 games, one thing Coach Sexton said they have to do better is tackling. That was one thing he was very disappointed with against Springfield Central this past weekend. He said there was too many missed tackles, especially on the ground game. Springfield Central, Sion Cox, he had about 137 yards on the ground, and he had another 77 yards receiving. And they also had a hard time getting them off the field, getting Springfield Central off the field. They did have their moments where they moved the ball really well. Their ground game worked. They had 2 long sustained drives, but Springfield Central just had too much offense for them that game. They're gonna run into the same thing with St. John's Prep this Friday. One thing we know about Coach St. Pierre, he's gonna run that ball. He has the receivers, he has the quarterback, but we know what he loves to do is run that ball and play a physical brand of football. So if St. John's Prep gets that early lead on them, we're going to see a heavy dose of that run game, and that heavy package too in the short yardage situation is really effective. And St. John's Prep, a lot of talent. As Tyler said, Chris Vargas, he's as good as advertised. He's played really well these first 2 games. He's very poised under the pocket. When all else fails, he's going to go to Merrick Barlow, and you got a 6'4", 6'5" receiver out there, and he just throws it to him, and they have a good connection. So I think it would be too much St. John's Prep in this game.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, the Prep is looking like the early favorite in D1 for sure. All right, next up we have Duxbury at Hanover, a D4, D5 matchup. It's a Patriot League matchup. Both teams come in 2-0. Hanover beat Duxbury last year during the regular season. So this is a big revenge kind of game for the Dragons here.
Yeah, I think it is sort of a revenge game here. It's a nice little rivalry. It's a crossover in the Patriot League. And last year, of course, we saw Hanover win. Hanover lost a lot, but they're off to a good start again this year. They beat a always competitive Somerset Berkeley team. Then they kind of beat up on Hingham last week. So the offense is still able to score. They're still able to put up points even after graduating Scalzi and McDonald from last year's team. I think Hanover is very good, and I think they're going to be a competitive team in Division 5 again this year, maybe the second best team after Foxborough. But Duxbury is very good. We saw what they did last week to Mansfield, that they were able to shut down that team that scored 45 on Everett the week before. Strong offensive line. Trevor Jones is a playmaker. Jack Reese has really emerged as a top back on the South Shore. I think the Dragons are just going to be too much in this one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Duxbury, the first 2 games, even the game, their home opener against Abington, it was a good game, but they showed their physical brand of football in that game. As you said, really containing Mansfield, who may have came in that game with a lot of confidence. They probably left with no confidence after what Duxbury did to them. We know what we're getting with Duxbury. We're getting a physical brand of football. We're getting great offensive line play. You're getting solid running game. As Tyler said, I think they're just going to be too much for the Hanover to handle. I just think that front is just too is too much to handle for a lot of teams. And if you don't got the guys, you don't got the guys.
All right, next up, we are going to come back to Division One, and this is kind of an old school matchup. Xaverian visits Everett. They're playing again. Of course, Everett had a good year last year, didn't make the D1 playoffs because of strength of schedule. So they went out and they scheduled a bunch of quality games. This is one of them. Of course, the defending D1 champions come in off a bye after beating Bishop Feehan week 1. Mukal, I'm going to start with you here. Just some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, Xaverian looked really good week 1. They looked when we talked about before that game, we talked about the physicality of the team. We talked about Micah. We talked about a lot of people on that team, and they all showed up in that week 1 game against Bishop Feehan. So going into Everett, this is going to be a good one. The thing with Everett, they got a little something back after their opening loss to Mansfield. Winning against Medford, maybe that got them going. Offensively, and the penalties with Everett, that was the key thing. The penalties in week 1, they had a lot of undisciplined plays. They got to be very, very disciplined when they're playing Xaverian, because if you're not disciplined, they're really going to hurt you. They're gonna have to do a better job blocking the quarterback, and they're gonna have to get those explosive plays. Everett, they need those explosive plays against Xaverian, because Xaverian offensively they'll have their moments where they'll find some explosive plays and make explosive plays. So can Everett match that? And granted, the good thing for them, they're at home, but this is gonna be a tough task for Everett. But I think Xaverian is gonna take this one.
Yeah, Everett's kind of an interesting team, right? Like there's definitely still talent there, not quite as talented as they have been in years past, but there's still talent there, and I think you saw glimpses of that in that Medford game in the second half. It was a pretty close game. I think it was tied at 14, and then Everett ended up pulling away in that one. So I think they're still going to be able to score points. I don't know if this is the matchup for that, though. We know that Xaverian team is stout on defense, as always. Will Wood's going to make plays on offense. Buse is going to make plays on offense. And then on the defensive line, it's really, I think, going to be an unblockable tandem for most teams with Amity and Funk. I think that's going to be the case again here. I think they're going to wreak havoc on that tied offense. So I think Xaverian wins by a few scores in this one.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive game, but I think ultimately Xaverian's defense proves to be the difference here. I like Xaverian in this one as well. Next up, we have King Philip visiting Norwood. Warriors have opened up the season 2-0. Mustangs 1-1. They're coming off a win over Stoughton week 1 and a tough loss last week to Canton, 27-21. Last year, this was a much more competitive game than people thought. KP won 28-0, but it was only 14-0 at the half. Tyler, I want to start with you. Just some thoughts on this one, as you got two teams, one team from the Hawk, one team from the Bay State League facing off.
Yeah, I think Norwood's going to be a good team again. They're going to be a playoff team again. I have no reason to bet against KP at this point. Their running game's too strong. Defense, as always, is going to be stout. So I think the Warriors are going to control this one. I think KP will be tested eventually once they get into, start getting into like the Hawk slate. But I think for now they're going to handle business and kind of clean up on the non-conference opponents. It could be competitive. You could see something like last year where it's a 1 or 2 possession game, maybe late second quarter at halftime. But ultimately, I think KP pulls away in the end, wins by a few scores, kind of similar to what I was saying in that Xaverian Everett game.
I think KP might come out and dominate this game. I think it might. Yeah, I'm leaning towards KP. I just think they're gonna come out and dominate this game. When you lose a game like they did last week by 1 score, you want to come out and put out your best effort. It might be close for a little bit, but I just think KP will probably be laser focused and just trying to get back in the win column. They'll go back to their brand of football, and I think they're gonna dominate this game.
All right. Next up, we have Needham at Lincoln Sudbury. Of course, the Rockets have opened the season 2-0. 2 impressive wins to start the season over Milton and Natick. They now venture outside of conference play to take on a Lincoln Sudbury program that traditionally has been pretty good. Of course, Coach McKay in his first year there. Program that has athletes. They're kind of at a crossroads here. This is a program that I do think is going to start to play to their ability and to the level they can play. It's going to take some time. But I do think that this is a game that, when you look at it on paper, Needham is coming off 2 big wins. You can't sleep on this LS team. Mukal, I'm going to start with you. Just some thoughts on this one.
I think Lincoln Sudbury is probably going to be going through a lot of growing pains this year. They'll be competitive, but they might just find themselves a little too inexperienced, and that probably might be the reason why they lose some of these games here and there. And I think Needham's trying to get to the state championship. They're trying to get to Gillette, so they have to play their best night in, night out, just so they could put themselves in a great position at the end of the season. So I think they're definitely going to come in this game laser focused. They're not going to take Lincoln Sudbury lightly because they probably are aware that they do have a bunch of athletes on that team, a bunch of players. So I think Needham is going to run away with this one.
I think Lincoln Sudbury, we saw what they could do last year when they upset Methuen. I understand it's a new coaching staff, but it's always a competitive program regardless of who's at the helm. And so I think Lincoln Sudbury, they're a team that shouldn't be taken lightly. With that said, though, Needham, it's still very early. We're only 2 weeks into the season. It looks like Needham might have the best defense in the state this year, or at least top 5. So I think that's going to continue. I think Lincoln Sudbury is going to struggle to score points in this game. Needham has enough firepower on offense to get it done. So I think the Rockets win going away in this one.
All right, next up we have an old school Bay State League matchup, one of the best rivalries in the Bay State League. Natick visits Walpole. Walpole coming off a big 21-18 win over Foxborough last week. Natick coming off a tough loss to Needham. Again, like I said, this is a rivalry game, probably the best rivalry in the Bay State League, has been for a long time. These two programs are power players in the conference, and this rivalry goes way back to the Tom Lamb, John Lee years. But it should be a great matchup. I think that these are two pretty evenly matched teams. Tyler?
I think they are pretty evenly matched. I think it's a little bit, sort of contrasting styles. I think Walpole wants to play a little bit more finesse than Natick does. Natick's been playing pretty good defense. I thought they hung tough with Needham. Maybe the final score didn't really indicate that it was super competitive, but that was a tight game throughout. I think Natick's going to be a good team. They're going to be in the D1 playoff mix. Walpole's going to be in the thick of D3, though. We know what Noah McKenzie can do. St. Cyr had a big game last week against Foxborough. I think it's going to be very similar to that Foxborough game. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a score like that again, 21-18, 22-20, something like that, back and forth game, but I like Walpole.
Natick is the home team?
It's at Walpole.
It's at Walpole. Okay. Yeah, these are rivalry games. Rivalry games, you never know what happens. They're usually always close, back and forth game. I think this might be another case of one of those games. They might give us a classic this weekend when they meet up. So I think Walpole, though, just having the home field advantage, I think they're going to make just a little bit more plays in the fourth quarter to pull away. But I think it might be a back and forth game for the most part. But I think Walpole's going to most likely pull away in the fourth quarter.
All right, next up we have a North Shore matchup between Andover, or Merrimack Valley matchup, I should say, between Andover and Chelmsford. Of course, Andover bounced back after a tough opening weekend loss to Pinkerton with a win over Shrewsbury last week. Chelmsford is coming off a tough loss to Bishop Feion. Pretty good matchup here between two teams that you got. Andover, traditionally a very good skill program, has good size. Chelmsford, really good up front this year with Thomas Brown leading the way. Should be a good MVC matchup here. McCall, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the key will be quarterback Dominic Papa, keeping him in the pocket, then not letting him run around, get loose. Because once you do that, he'll start finding alleys and not getting big yards, but he'll get extra first downs using his feet. But he's really good in the pocket too as well. So Andover, they always have weapons. I think they're gonna put up some points in this one and come out with the win.
Out of all the games we're picking tonight, I think this is probably the one I had the toughest time with. I'm gonna lean Chelmsford here. I think both teams are kind of in similar spots. I expect that they'll both ultimately kind of get better as the season goes on. I think Andover will be a playoff team in D1. I think Chelmsford is a playoff team in D2. You mentioned Thomas Brown in that line play. I think that's going to be the difference. That they're just going to wear Andover down. I think it's going to be competitive, something like 17-14, 21-17, something like that. But I got the Lions.
Yeah, and they have been building towards this year. I mean, George Peterson has done a good job there. They've been a perennial playoff team since he took the helm, but I think that they have high hopes for this year. This is a big year for them, and in order for them to get to where they want to go in the MVC, this is a game they're going to need to win. Staying up north, next up we got Billerica at Westford Academy. Billerica coming off a tough opening season loss to Masconomet. Westford Academy, meanwhile, beat Lowell. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think, in my opinion anyway, the most surprising result from last weekend was Masconomet beating Billerica. I'm very high on Billerica this year. I think they're one of the top 2 or 3 best teams in Division III. I think ultimately here, Coach Sigsbury, he's got a lot of returning pieces from last year's team. They're a very skilled group. I think Westford Academy's good. I don't think they have the horses that Billerica has, though. Billerica also has a chip on their shoulder coming off that upset loss. I like the Indians here.
I'm gonna go with Tyler on this one. I think Billerica is gonna try and control this game and try to go be dominate up front. Try to be a little more physical. I think they're gonna utilize that running game of theirs, make plays out there, and I just think they won't have a bounce back. You don't want to fall 0-2 this early in the season. So I think Billerica is just definitely gonna bounce back and probably gonna dominate this game.
All right. Yeah, they need this one. Both teams do, and Coach Rich has done a great job at Westford, but I think for Billerica, you lose this one, now you're 0-2. You're chasing games. And so one thing you don't want to do early in the year is play from behind, because now you're looking at your schedule thinking, okay, we're 0-2. We got to win this week. Can't afford to go 0-3. And now you're trying to play catch up the first quarter of the season. All right, next up, we have Bridgewater Raynham visiting Marshfield in a classic matchup between 2 former league mates. Marshfield coming off a big come-from-behind win over Methuen last week at home. Meanwhile, tough loss for Ian Baines Trojans. They had a last-second loss to Plymouth South. McCall, I'm going to start with you. Just some thoughts here on this one.
Marshfield, first two weeks of this season, they keep digging themselves into big holes. They got out of one last week. Week 1, they got down big, made a little run at it, but still they couldn't win it. I just hope they don't continue doing this as we go on with the season, keep digging themselves out of these holes, because one thing I've seen, there's a lot of firepower on offense for those guys. They have a lot of playmakers on offense. The offense is really good, and it seems like when they're playing hurry up, they're hard to stop. Those receivers get out there, get open really quick. So I expect them to come out this game a little more assertive and not try to fall behind 2-3 scores and then play catch up the rest of the way. So I'm going to lean towards Marshfield in this one.
It's funny that you mentioned Marshfield digging these early holes early. It happens all the time. Like, I've seen Marshfield play games at Marshfield like 3 consecutive years, and they've fallen behind by 20 points in all of them. I mentioned that to Chris Aruka after the game, Marshfield coach Chris Aruka. He said, I think you just need to stop coming to our games. So, but
I've known him for a long time. I could see him saying that.
He's one of my favorite coaches to talk to in the state. I really enjoyed talking to Chris. But Marshfield's going to put up points. I was really impressed with their defense last week, though. They fell behind 20-0 early within the first 13 minutes of the game against Methuen. Shane Eason, in my opinion, is probably the most dynamic offensive player in the state. He had 3 touchdowns, over 100 yards from scrimmage over 150 yards from scrimmage, I think, in the first 13 minutes of the game. Then they really kind of buckled down, clamped down, made some adjustments on defense, and then that pace we talk about all the time, that pace they play with on offense really wears teams down. I think that's going to be the case again here. In BR, no disrespect to them and their players, they just don't have a Shane Eason caliber player. And so I don't think that they're going to put the pressure on the Marshfield defense that Methuen was able to put on them. So overall, I think Marshfield, that they just play with that tempo too much. It's going to wear BR down. They're going to put up some points in this game. They're without Charlie Carroll right now. He will be returning at some point this season, but he's not playing as BR. Even still, I think they have enough weapons to get it done. Tormas, very good playmaker and distributor in that offense.
All right. Next up, we have Ian Baines' former team, the Franklin Panthers. They're going to be they're going to have their first home game of the season after opening the first 2 weeks on the road at Central Catholic and at Wachusett. The Panthers host Brockton. This has kind of become a rivalry game of sorts, if you will. These two teams have played each other for a while. Brockton has never beaten Franklin. Could this be the year? Mukal, I'm going to start with you. Just some thoughts on this one.
I don't think this is going to be the year that they beat Franklin. When Franklin goes to that wing T offense, they really move the ball extremely well when they go to that wing T. I think they're going to see Brockton is going to see a heavy dose of that wing T, and Brockton they're going through some changes. New coaching staff there, so I think they're another team. They're going to be going through growing pains. I don't think this is the year they'll beat Franklin. I just think Franklin still has a lot of talent to make a run in Division I. They got the players there, and yeah, that wing T is. When I saw them bring out that wing T against Central Catholic, they moved the ball really well with that wing T. So I think we're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of like the Todd Kiley staple there. Like they'll be spread, and then they go to that war package, and they just start wearing you down. They did that at Hollister for years. So I think Franklin's going to be. I think they're going to get better as the season goes on. I really do. Todd Kiley's a great coach. Franklin's going to be a tough out in Division I. I think they win this game. I'm really most curious to see how Brockton responds to last week's game. For those of you listening who don't know what happened, they were up, could have taken a few kneels and got out of Barnstable with a win. They ended up throwing the ball. It was intercepted. Barnstable had a long return, and then Barnstable scored in the final minute to win the game. So I'll be interested to kind of see how how the players respond to that, how the coaches respond to that. It's a younger coaching staff, a younger team as well. So it's really interesting to see kind of how they respond to a loss of that nature that they had to Barnstable. So I'm curious I'm looking out to see if that impacts them at all. But either way, I've got Franklin.
All right, next up, we're going to visit Central Mass, and we're going to take a look at Doherty at Leominster. Leominster, of course, coming off of a big 36-35 win over Milford. Doherty has an early season win against Algonquin. Tyler, I'm going to start with you.
So Doherty's in my eyes anyway, they're like a consistently underrated program. Like they're always very good. They're always competitive. I think that's going to be the case again. They're like very consistently a top 5 team in Central Mass. I would expect them to be in that conversation again as a top 5 team in Central Mass. Ultimately, I just think Osiris Lopez and that offense is too powerful for probably anyone in Central Mass at this point. I was really impressed with Leominster last week when they beat Milford. I thought that was one of the most impressive wins of the early season so far. Osiris Lopez is arguably the best quarterback in the state. I got the Blue Devils.
Osiris Lopez, man, what a performance he had last week. Didn't start off well in the first half last week, but the second half he had was one to remember. I think he's gonna carry that momentum into this week's game, and I just think Leominster got too much firepower. They're too hot on offense. They got too much going on offense. They can put up a lot. They can put those points up in a flurry, and I'm leaning towards Leominster in this one. All
right, we're going to now go back to the southern part of the state here, the southeastern part of the state. Fairhaven at Old Rochester. Fairhaven coming off a tough loss to BC High at home. Old Rochester 2-0. That includes a win over Attleboro out of the Hockomock League. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Just some thoughts on this one.
I think Old Rochester kind of had a wild comeback win over Bishop Stang last week. Fairhaven, they return a ton. They return a ton from last year's state championship team. I'm happy that they went out and challenged themselves playing a good D1 program in BCI. They really were competitive, especially when you factor in that they're Division 6 and they played a Division 1 private school. They were very competitive in that game. BCI just had too much talent and too much speed at the end to really pull that one out. But I was at this game last year. I think that was kind of the turning point for Fairhaven's season where they realized they could beat anyone. They beat Old Rochester. They shut them out. I think it was 28-0. And that's the game that I realized that Justin Marks was really like a horse. They were kind of keeping him on ice a little bit early in the season. Then he had like 35 carries in that game. I think you're going to see something similar again here. 35 carries for Justin Marks. That offensive line's too good. Marks is too good. Blue Devils win this one.
Same sentiment. I was just gonna say the same thing. Justin Marks. I think we might see a 30, 40 carry game for him, maybe 200 yards. But I think he's gonna that program. I think they're gonna bounce back after that tough loss to BC High. Good game for them to schedule. Good test for those players. I see they got a dose of what it's like playing the higher level Division I program. So I think they'll use the good things they did in that game, taken in this game. But yeah, Justin Marks. I think if he gets 40 carries, I wouldn't be surprised in this one.
Okay, next matchup we have is on the South Coast, Scituate at Norwell. Norwell has 2 wins so far, beating Blue Hills and Cohasset. Of course, Scituate had a big win week 1 against Foxborough. They beat Whitman Hanson last week. Mukal, I'm going to start with you on this one. Just some thoughts here. Herb Devine Sailors going into Norwell, a Norwell team, by the way, that's a pretty good team and kind of flying under the radar, big picture.
Sometimes there's those games that you might think will go one way, but it goes another way just because of the location, Scituate's going over there on the road, Norwell. This might be one of those games that's perfectly set up for an upset for Norwell. They, as you said, they have been playing well to start this season off. Scituate as well. This could be one of those confidence. They could boost the Norwell team's confidence a little bit more if they get this game. So I'm gonna go with Norwell in this one. I think we might need an upset for the week. This might be it.
I wouldn't be surprised if we see both of these teams playing at Gillette at the end of the year. Scituate in D4, Norwell in D6. Last year, Norwell was the number 1 seed in Division 6, and they were upset in the quarterfinals by Fairhaven, the eventual state champion. Will Bostром's back. He's going to be a playmaker for them all year. I saw Scituate play against Foxborough. I was very impressed. I think that Johnny Donovan to Lawson Foley connection is just only going to grow as the season progresses. So I've got the Sailors here. I think they're the best team in Division 4. I think they're going to win by a couple touchdowns here, but Norwell's a very good team.
All right, next up we go to the Hockomock League for a Kelly Rex matchup between Taunton and North Attleboro. Taunton visits North. Of course, last season, Taunton beat North Attleboro in a big win for Brad Sidwell's Tigers. Taunton has a pretty good skill group that they returned. North has looked pretty dominant so far in 2 early season wins. This should be another really good matchup. Tyler, I'm going to start with you here.
Yeah, I'll try to go quick here. I know Ryan's probably waiting on you, so I'll try to do a little lightning round. I was at this game a couple years ago. It was 3-0. I think it's going to be a little bit more high scoring than that, but North's defense has been really impressive so far. I like North like 14-7, something like that.
14-7. I'm going to go 21-14. I'm going to go 21-14 in this one. North.
Yeah, North looks good. They really do. And I think that they're kind. I'm not going to sit here and say they're the forgotten team in D3. That program is never forgotten. I mean, they're a perennial powerhouse. But this is a team that I don't think coming into the season enough people were talking about. I think they're pretty legit. Now that they're on the Davenport side of things, they're certainly going to be in the mix there to win that side of the Hawk. Next up, we're going to stay with the Hawk, but we have another Bay State Hawk matchup, and this one is Wellesley at Milford. Both teams come into this game at 2-0. Of course, the Scarlet Hawks are coming off a tough loss to Leominster. Wellesley is coming off a win over Dedham. Mukal, I'm going to start with you with this one.
Anytime a team loses a tough one where the game was right there for them, they always come back with a little more pep in their step. It's gonna be another dogfight for them, this one, but I think they bounce back. I think Milford is gonna bounce back in this one.
So this one and Andover Chelmsford were the 2 toughest ones for me to pick. Ultimately, I'm going Milford here, but Lucas Prock's a very good sophomore quarterback for Wellesley. I think they're kind of a team flying under the radar. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they win this game. I lean Milford slightly, 24-21.
All right, next up, we're going to go back to the North Shore. We got Shawsheen at Winthrop. This will be an interesting game. Quarterback Sid Tildesley, of course, is the leader of that Shawsheen program. They'll be a player again in D5. Winthrop has also been pretty good as well. Mukal, I'm going to start with you and your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, Winthrop, they always put together a solid team. They put together a solid team out every year. They always they're always competitive. They always have a few good athletes on their programs. I know they had one guy transfer, but they usually have other guys to replace him. So I think Winthrop's gonna be a little bit more to handle for Shawsheen Tech. So I think Well, I'm gonna go with Winthrop.
John, you know who I got. I got
Sid.
Sling and Sid. He's a playmaker, man. He was returning punts for touchdowns this year too. Shawshan's kind of beefed up that schedule this year. They beat up on Belmont. They beat Bedford already. They still got Winthrop, and then they got Wayland. It's a pretty difficult schedule for this team. I wouldn't be surprised if they're back at Gillette again in D5. I got the Rams.
All right, and keep an eye on Winthrop running back Nick Capuccio too. He's one of the better players in the state. CM St. Francis got canceled, so we will not be previewing that game. All right, next up, ISL kicks off this weekend. BB&N at Lawrence Academy. Of course, BB&N, what can you say about the great Bo McCormick? He's back for his final year running the ball for Mike Willie and the Knights. Damon Taylor takes over at quarterback, and I think that BB&N passing game could be pretty good here. They take on a Lawrence Academy team that graduated a lot of key players but returns a pretty good line. Just some thoughts on this one. Mukal, I'm going to start with you.
McCormick. It's going to be the McCormick show.
It really will.
Yeah, it's just a matter, can Lawrence Academy stop him from getting in the end zone? We've seen what he did. We saw what he did last year, and he's come back. He's a much better player than he was last year. I'm sure he's added some other stuff to his skill set. So I'm just gonna go with BB&N.
Yeah, I got BB&N too. Like McCormick's just too good. I think Damon Taylor's going to kind of add another element to this offense. BB&N got this one for sure, I think.
All right, next up we have St. Seb's at Belmont Hill, in which it's a rivalry game, and this is going to be a pretty good game to open the season. We're going to be covering this one. Belmont Hill returns quarterback Reese Little and a bevy of D1 talent. Anthony Fucillo's done a great job there. St. Seb's, they're always well coached year in and year out. Coach Burke and his staff do a good job there. Tyler, I'm going to start with you. Who do you like in this one?
This is another one I've really struggled with to pick. I think I kind of need to see a few weeks out of these teams before I get a better feel for them. I'm going to lean Belmont Hill here. I don't feel overly confident about that pick, but I am going to lean Belmont Hill.
It's a rivalry game. Rivalry games always bring us some interesting games. I think St. Seb's might pull off the upset. I'm gonna lean towards St. Seb's.
Belmont Hill won the league last year, and I don't think anybody saw that coming. By the time you got to week 4 and 5, people started to realize how good that program was again. Going into it, it's kind of wide open this year. You'd have to say BB&N could be an early favorite, but I'm telling you, man, Anthony Fucillo's done a great job with this Belmont Hill program. Don't sleep on them repeating. You still have Milton Academy. You still have St. Seb's. It's still you got Tabor. Tabor has a load of talent back. Jeff Moore's done a great job there building that program. They're in the ISL 7 now. So it's going to be interesting to watch, but Belmont Hill will be amongst the favorites, but BB&N Tabor, they'll be in the mix as well. All right, we're going to go out of state here, and we're going to start with Connecticut. Fairfield Prep visiting Hand. This is one of the best matchups in Connecticut this weekend. Fairfield Prep coming off a big win over Southington last week. And look, Fairfield Prep 4-7 last year, 0-6 to start the season. And then the Jesuits went on a run. They got in, lost a tough playoff game to open the CIAC playoffs, but they return a lot of talent, namely Navy commit linebacker Mason Fry. Got a really good skill group here. Fairfield Prep, to me, going into the season, I felt that they were back. They're going to have a tough game here on their hands with Hand, who's coming off a win over New London. Very good program in Connecticut as well. I like Fairfield Prep in this one. I think that the Jesuits are going to fly under the radar, but once they get that signature win, I think more people are going to feel more comfortable about calling them a contender in Class LL.
Yeah, I think Fairfield Prep, I think you kind of stole my thoughts there, but I think they're going to rebound this year. They have that game against Hendricken coming up later in the year too, an awesome out-of-state game. I think Fairfield bounces back. I like them in this one. It's going to be competitive. I think like 26-20, something like that, but I got Fairfield Prep.
I'll make it quick. I'm going to go with Fairfield on this one. Just more playmakers. The more playmakers you have, I think better chances you are of winning, so I'm going to go with Fairfield.
All right. Next up, we go to Maine, where Portland visits Bonnie Eagle. Of course, the Bulldogs are 2-0 in the season. Bonnie Eagle does have a loss. They are on the younger side, but this Portland team, to me, isn't being talked about enough in Class A in Maine, and I think they should be. So much of the focus has been on Thornton Academy. Of course, they lost a tough one to Bedford last week, but this is going to be a really good game. Now, I'm leaning Portland here. I think Coach Green and his staff have done a really nice job bringing this program back to a place where they're consistently competitive. But look, Bonnie Eagle has been a power player in Maine for a long time. The Scots aren't just going to roll over and play dead at home. I think this is going to be a real good game. Tough one to pick. I'm going to lean Portland, but I'm telling you, one thing about Bonnie Eagle that we've learned through the years, they have won big games. They're a championship caliber program. I expect this to be a really good matchup.
I agree. I think it's going to be a very good matchup. It's tough, right? You mentioned Bonnie Eagles become one of the better programs, or is one of the better programs in Maine. And they're at home, so it's tough to bet against them in that scenario. But I think Portland's been more impressive in the early season, so I like Portland here.
I'm gonna go with the upset. I'm going with Bonnie Eagle. I think this might be. I'm picking a lot of upsets this week. Hopefully they happen, but I think that, as you said, they've played in big games. They've been in big games. They've had chances of winning big games. Maybe this is one of those moments where they get through and get one of those big games.
I'm really in Class A. I really am looking forward to the possibility of a Portland Thornton matchup, and I'm going to go Portland here. I think they're going to be they'll be challenged. It's Bonnie Eagle, but I think that the Dogs get it done. All right, next up we have Bedford at Bishop Girton in New Hampshire. Of course, Bedford coming off a big interstate win last week, 35-21 at Thornton Academy. That was a signature win for Coach Matthews and the Bulldogs. They're looking for the three-peat. Kansas City Chiefs aren't the only ones looking for the three-peat. Bedford is looking for the three-peat in Division I in New Hampshire. Look, Anthony Nalen's done a good job getting this Girton program back on track. They finished strong second half of last year. I think they can compete in this game. The talent is certainly there. The question is, can you get yours against that Bedford defense? And they always play good defense. But now all of a sudden, you got Jack May, that passing game. They can throw the ball. I can't pick against Bedford. Bedford went up to Thornton Academy, weathered that early storm, and won by 14. I'm not picking against the Bulldogs all year. Sorry. And I know Pinkerton and Londonderry will have something to say about it when the season ends. But I'm telling you, this Bedford team is a wagon.
I wouldn't be surprised by the end of the year if we're talking about Girton as a top 5 or 6 team in New Hampshire. I just think that there's a clearly defined top 3 again this year with Londonderry, Pinkerton, and Bedford. And you mentioned that Bedford defense. It was an enormous win over Thornton. I think that's really going to kind of be a springboard for them moving forward here. I just think the defense is too good. I think they're going to kind of smother Girton in this game. I like Bedford. I agree with you, John. I think they're the best team in New Hampshire, and I probably won't pick against them all season either.
You said they're going for a three-peat?
They are.
They're going for a three-peat. Well, when you want to go for a three-peat, you got to set the tone and send the message to all the teams. So I think that's what Bedford is most likely going to do in this matchup. They're going to set the tone and let everybody know that they're going for that three-peat.
Yeah, well, I think that they'll set the tone in the state, right? I mean, beating Thornton Academy last week certainly got people's attention. And by the way, they've beaten them the last 3 years in a row, so it's not a surprise. But I mean, again, I think this is one of the more underrated power programs in New England. Not enough people talk about how good Bedford has been in recent years. So, like I said, Coach Matthews and his staff do a great job there. All right, next up, we're going to go down to Rhode Island, where we got a big matchup. We'll be at this game. Bishop Hendricken at Cumberland. Cumberland coming off a big win last week over Barrington. Hendricken is coming off a bye. The Hawks are 1-1. Look, I don't think that Hendricken's going to look ahead. They have Greenwich next week in a big interstate matchup, Connecticut, Rhode Island. I would not overlook Josh Lima's team. I think Cumberland is going to surprise people. They're in D1 this year in Rhode Island. I think this is going to be a good early season test for Keith Croft's team. This Cumberland team at home is tough. I got to see them a bunch this summer. Coaching in KP, we were in a passing league with them. I like what they have. I like their skill group. I like them. I like what they have in the backfield. This is a good football team. I think Hendricken's going to have their hands full in this one.
I agree. I think that Cumberland win last week over Barrington was really impressive. And I think Cumberland and North Kingstown and Barrington are going to be in the conversation as who becomes that best public school in Rhode Island after Hendricken and LaSalle. And I think Cumberland's going to be a competitive team in
Throw
Division
North
One.
Kingstown in there too.
Yeah, right. North Kingstown too. So I think I lean Hendricken here just based on like the history of the program, the tradition of the program. It's kind of similar to how I feel with Bedford and New Hampshire. Like until somebody beats Hendricken, how do you pick against them?
Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth. I agree with those same sentiments. I think Hendrickson's gonna get this one, and you don't want to. Got a big game next week, so you don't want to go into that game. You don't want to overlook your opponent this week. So I think they'll be focused on this one.
And this is a statement matchup. I mean, the public schools, it's been a long time since the public schools have had success against Hendricken. I mean, I think Cumberland's going to go toe-to-toe with him. I think in the end, Hendricken's a little better. That'll prove to be the difference. But if you said to me on Friday night, without me looking, hey, by the way, Cumberland beat Hendricken, I don't know if I'd be that surprised. And the Hendricken coaches know that. That's why they're going to have Keith Croft's going to have this team ready to play. They're not going to be looking ahead to Greenwich and what could be a really important matchup for them the following week when they go on the road. But make no mistake about it. This is a big game for Cumberland. It's a statement game. All right, last game of the week. We're going to go to Vermont, Middlebury, and Hartford. Middlebury's 2-1 with blowout wins over Mount Anthony and Bellows Free Academy. Rutland is also, and they lost to Rutland, I should say. I'm sorry, they lost to Rutland Academy. Hartford is 2-1. Their only loss was to CVU. Look, when I look at this matchup, Middlebury won it all a couple of years ago. Hartford's been one of the best programs in the state. This is one of the better matchups you're going to get all year up there. Hartford's at home. I think these are two pretty evenly matched teams. CVU seems to be the class. You still have Burton in the mix as well. But I'm going to go Hartford here at home. I think that they get a big early season win over Middlebury.
I've got the Hurricanes too. CVU, I agree. They're definitely the class of Vermont. The only team to kind of play them somewhat competitively was Hartford. Still very early in the season, so that could change as things go on. But I like Hartford here. I think it's going to be a strong competitive game, something like 21-14. But give me Hartford.
In these types of games, I always try to lean towards the home team or the more experienced team. So I think Hartford, they're going to be the more focused team. I think they'll make a little bit more plays in this one. I think they're going to come out with this win.
All right.
Pull away.
I'm going to go with Hartford as well. All right, gentlemen. Great job. Appreciate the time as always. Of course, we're going to stay tuned here with New England Football Journal. We got plenty of high school football coverage for you this weekend. We try to cover as many games in the region as we can. And this weekend, we're going to have coverage of games for you in 4 states. So stay tuned. We got plenty of high school action on Friday night. We have a full college slate on Saturday. So make sure you're following along at anyfootballjournal.com. That'll do it for this week's episode of the High School Preview Show. For Tyler Amaral and Mukala Kabango, I'm John Serenitas. Till next week, peace.